you? Are you running the show?
No.
Who's running the show? Okay.
Hey, sir, when you get done, you need to talk to Ken.
Okay. Hi, everybody. You don't have to be so quiet.
Hello. Welcome to Stayton, and welcome to Ron Wyden's Marion County Town Hall Forum. Before we get started, we have Jesse Guerra. He is the Stayton High School Student Body President. He is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's give him a round of applause.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Jesse. And next we have Don Eubank, City Administrator, former Chief of Police from Stayton, to go over the format for Stayton.
Hopefully, if you walk in the door, if you wanted to speak or have a chance to speak, it's kind of a lottery system with tickets. And what will happen is I'll call out two numbers, and then if you raise your hand or stand up, then we'll come over with the microphone so you can ask your question. And the second person is done speaking, and then I'll call out two more numbers, and then we'll keep it going as quickly as we can. So thank you very much.
How about a round of applause for Mr. Eubank?
Okay, and Ron Wyden was first elected to Congress in 1980 to represent Oregon's 3rd District. And in 1996, he was elected to the U.S. Senate in a special election, becoming the first U.S. Senator to be elected by all-male mail-in election. The females were also involved there as early. Yes, I was in high school, and when Senator Ron Wyden was elected in '96, he promised to do a town hall in every county every year. After more than 600 town halls, let's welcome Senator Ron Wyden to his town hall number 603. But who's counting, right? Okay.
What an inflationary introduction. You've got to keep this question of the age, particularly the age of senators, a little bit in perspective. At one point, Fritz Hollings, who was a senator from South Carolina, was his state's junior senator at the age of 80. And that was because his senior senator was Fritz Hollings, who was serving at 99, which prompted my older daughter, who recently got out of college. She said, "Dad, we were studying the Senate, really looking at some of those people. I figured it out that you are in the only profession on earth, Dad, where somebody your age is one of the young guys." So it's got to be kept in perspective. How many of you have never been to one of our town meetings before? Raise your hands. Okay, we've got some newcomers. What happens at one of these is I talk for about an hour to start it. And it's really, really fun. And the gentleman in the blue jacket thinks I'm serious. His face, you can just see it turned all white. He's trying to figure out, I think that's his spouse, trying to figure out how they could get out of here. No, this is not going to be anything like that. This is part of the pledge that I made when we were choosing our first new United States Senator in 30 years. I said, if I have the honor of representing Oregon in the United States Senate, we will throw open the doors of government, and I will go to every county in Oregon, all 36, every year, and we'll have an open community meeting so we cover everybody's questions and everybody's concerns. So I've done that. This is town hall meeting number 603 in the time that I've been in office. Particularly right now where people have so many understandable reasons to be frustrated and angry with all the bickering and quarreling and the like. This gives us a chance to to do government the way the founding fathers, I think, wanted it done, to bring people together, to try to solve problems. And particularly right now, I think we know that this is an election year, but that shouldn't give members of Congress a pass in terms of the people's business, particularly on the jobs issue. Got a chance on forestry, on the farm bill, on transportation. There's some real bread and butter issues to get into. And then, of course, there are a lot of other issues that need to be debated as well. And we've just got Mr. Eubank here, who's going to run the ship with all of his diplomacy and the like. And why don't we just go right to calling out numbers? We'll cover what everybody's interested in. If somebody asked me once, do I have to ask a softball question? And I said, nope, every subject's on limits. So let's just cover what you're interested in.
First number is 565. Second number is 585. Please raise your hand or stand up so we can get a microphone to you. 565, last three numbers. 585.
So do I get a prize? It's not very often on first hit.
Play a cracker jackpot.
Okay, I didn't have anything really prepared, but I'm not a veteran myself, but I work for a veterans organization here, and I first of all want to thank you for all you've done for veterans in the state of Oregon.
Thank you.
Your work with the Roseburg VA Hospital and that. My question really is related to aging folks and people with disabilities that rely on long-term care in the state. State-wise, I mean, there's cuts in the Department of Human Services that are going to quickly take people out of their homes and into nursing homes. And me, I'm young enough where and strong enough and independent to take care of myself, but there may not be an option when I'm retiring to live independently and have in-home care. I might have to transition to a nursing home a lot sooner than I'd like. So can you address that for me?
I will. Thanks for your kind words about the veterans tomorrow. We're having a demobilization ceremony as well for the vets that are coming back. So we really appreciate that. And a lot of our employers, particularly in the Valley, have been reaching out and hiring some of those vets. And I just would make kind of a personal request. If you know any employers that are hiring, just tell them those vets can't get anybody with better work ethic. They passed the drug test. A lot of savvy on technology. Let's try to hire vets. So start with that. Point with respect to long-term care, and this is an area where we have just been dragging our feet for year after year. We're at the point now where we're not even seeing home care and opportunities like you're talking about extended for what's called the dual eligibles, people who are eligible for Medicare and Medicaid. And it's time for government foot dragging to stop. I got into the health reform legislation, something called independence at home, which would allow us for the first time to get serious about home care. And as you know, you really touched on it. Oregon, years ago, back when I was director of the Great Panthers, I had a full head of hair and rugged good looks and all that, we were on the vanguard with Oregon Project Independence. I see a lot of folks nodding their head. We've got to get back on that. And the real model should be the VA. The VA, with 240 centers around the country, has taken people who actually are sicker than what we typically see. They're called comorbidities. They have more illnesses, heart, stroke, diabetes, and the like. The VA is taking care of them at home rather than in institutional settings, and they're saving more than 20% on that population with home-based care. So you're going to hear me talking a lot about that this year. It's been bipartisan. You'll also hear most of what I've tried to do, tax reform and health, it had to be bipartisan because it's a tough issue. You've got to bring people together. Independence at home is the wave of the future. And it's going to start with what are called the dual eligibles, people who are eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid, the VA model, and we have hundreds of thousands who ought to be served in that setting, and we have not seen it done. So that's a great way to start the meeting. Thanks for your comments about the vets. And this question of home care, there are a lot of other pieces to the home care puzzle as well. Clearly, what we ought to do is make it more attractive for people to save for private long-term care kinds of opportunities. My concern there is let's make sure the policies keep up with inflation, because that's been part of the problem with private long-term care insurance. There's going to need to be some more consumer protection there. But suffice it to say, let's start with independence at home. Let's look at ways to start building up the opportunities for people to save for private coverage as well, recognizing that the real barometer there is to keep up with the costs of health care and the costs of inflation.
585.
That was me.
Okay. 565.
See a lot of beavers out there. I heard the beavers won last night. Is that true? Yes.
Anybody have
We had
565?
the Ducks, the Beavers, and the Blazers. I like that.
That's not. That should be 540 and 573. 540.
You're up. Go to it. Were you 540 or 573? I'm 540. Okay, so 573 be on deck.
Okay. Senator, what can we do to get some accountability out of, I know you're in the Senate, but the House of Representatives, which is particularly frustrating. They're like a bunch of fifth graders at recess. They debate bills about the national motto. While our bridges are falling down, people are out of work. How can we get some action out of them? How could we get some manner, get a report from the House on what they accomplished in the previous week? They need more supervision, is my point.
I'm going to steer clear of telling folks in the House of Representatives what to do, but my own view is, and I don't think this is real complicated, it's not rocket science. There isn't one party rule, and there isn't going to be one party rule anytime soon. So what you've got to do is find some kind of way to tell elected officials, knock off all this bickering and quarreling and try to find some common ground and get serious about real solutions. Can you believe all of this huffing and puffing at the end of the year to get a 2-month extension on the payroll tax break? And of course, that doesn't give businesses and individuals the certainty and predictability they need to go out and make investments and make the kinds of purchases that'll grow the economy. And get this, that came after 89 United States senators voted for the legislation. 89. It's like running the tables. You can probably find it hard to get 89 people to agree on buying a Coca-Cola. And that was, possible. And the big issues, I mentioned independence at home, we talked about health issues. I'm putting a lot of time into tax reform because it's so important to the economy. The bill that I'm proposing on tax reform is the first bipartisan tax reform bill in 25 years. Since the days when Ronald Reagan got together with a big group of Democrats and passed tax reform. And my proposal is basically an updated version. You go in there, clean out a whole boatload of special interest, tax breaks. Use that money to hold down rates for everybody and keep progressivity. That's what Democrats and Ronald Reagan agreed to do a quarter century ago. And Senator Dan Coates, the Republican senator from Indiana, and I have pretty much introduced an updated version. I'll tell you about a couple of differences. But in the 2 years after Democrats and Ronald Reagan got together on tax reform, along the lines of what I proposed, we created 6.3 million new private sector jobs, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That sounds pretty good to me. 6.3 million new jobs. And if anything, some of the issues we're tackling are even more important today than back in '86. For example, Senator Coates and I take away the tax break for shipping jobs overseas. And we use those very same dollars to lower tax rates for people who do business in the United States. I call them red, white, and blue jobs. So those are the kinds of issues that I think we ought to be telling people all across the political spectrum we've got to be attacking. And you look at that history, Ronald Reagan, a very conservative Republican, teaming up with Dick Gephardt and a whole bunch of Democrats who were certainly quite liberal, Democrats. And Democrats could say that the tax system was fair, something I sure feel strongly about. And Republicans could say there was an interest in private sector job growth. And by the way, I happen to agree with a lot of that interest too, to generate jobs in the private sector. So let's try to find those kinds of alliances, and that's what I'm spending my time on. And I'll pass on telling the House of Representatives how to do its business. But boy, we sure saw an example at the end of the year where after all that huffing and puffing, you got a 2-month extension on the payroll tax, and it's called the doctor's fix for their reimbursement. And,
573. Last three numbers, 573. Going once. Gone. 581 and 563.
My question has to do with my kids.
Yeah.
3 issues. The deficit, unfunded liabilities, one of them Social Security. Are you going to tell me, will look in my daughter's eyes and tell her she will have to work till age 70 as a mandatory requirement? And 3, relaxation, but with restrictions on finance mortgage. I've got 2 kids up in Bend area in a townhome. They cannot refinance. They got, both of them work, they got good jobs, and basically they're 20,000 under water, but they cannot refinance. Yet I can. But if you want to help the middle class and young generation, there needs to be some relaxation on the real estate because the pendulum has swung way too far.
Good. I mean, it's scribbling hard to get all of them because those are important issues for young people. The first on the deficit issue, which of course is the hugely important question of our time. We're looking at a debt of $15 trillion. And you were asking about, am I going to look at the kids? Nancy and I were blessed to have twins. Ava Rose Wyden and William Peter Wyden, age 4. Pictures available on my iPhone after the meeting. They entertained the entire plane after our return from Hawaii. A few days ago, we took them to the Disney Resort, and when everyone was about to fall asleep on the plane, we were sitting in row 40. William Peter Wyden gets up and says, actually quite loudly, says, "Time for sweets." So I'm dealing with what the consequences are for young people as well. I supported the Bowles-Simpson recommendations coming to the floor of the Senate. Bowles-Simpson, Erskine Bowles, former chief of staff to Bill Clinton, Alan Simpson, the former Republican senator from Wyoming, came up with a commission that involved spending. And by the way, they said that they told the Senate, they modeled their tax reform ideas after my bill. That was their testimony. So I supported that. And I said, look, there are a bunch of things in this I don't agree with. In other words, you could take 4 or 5 things, and I bet you that'd be true for everybody here. But I said what I thought should have been done is the calendar should have been cleared in the Senate, and we should have spent a good 6 weeks working on that in order to be able to tell your kid that we were getting serious about that $15 trillion debt. That was my first choice. I obviously didn't have my way, and I would have supported it being sent to the floor. I would have told people there are a bunch of things I don't agree with, in it. We've got to roll up our sleeves and do our job. Now, it wasn't done. We're going to clearly have to get back to something bipartisan. It's one of the reasons I'm pushing this tax reform issue so hard. That was essentially, on the tax side, their recommendation. They listed our proposal as specifically one of the items. Question number 2 on your list was on the refinance issue. And particularly, we've got to help the young people who I call the responsible borrower. There are a bunch of young people who are underwater and having problems, not because they went out and blew a bunch of money on frivolous stuff, but because they were caught up in this economic climate. A woman called me the other day, a young woman who is in big trouble with her mortgage because she was too responsible. She put too much money down, and the values in the neighborhood fell apart, and now her place is isn't worth as much as the mortgage. And we've got to figure out a way, at a minimum, to give the discretion so that there can be refinances for these young people who are responsible borrowers. Third point on entitlements on Social Security. Social Security is a big issue. Medicare is a lot bigger, and it is a lot more immediate. And the auditors say in 2024, we're going to be bumping up against some serious problems. We're not going to be able to pay the bills. Lots more older people, medical costs skyrocketing. And you may have heard that I put together, taking a lot of flack on it from various sides, bipartisan proposal with Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin. I appreciate the thumbs up. I can tell you I certainly got a lot of thumbs the other way as I've gone around D.C. and the like. But here's the bottom line. And this is, again, my philosophy of bipartisanship. Bipartisanship is not about accepting each other's bad ideas. Bipartisanship is about taking good ideas that are principled and make it attractive for people to come together. So what I said in this effort, and this is just sort of laying this out, generally, and that's what we're going to spend, the next year on. I said I think Democrats are right to say we've got to protect traditional Medicare, where the government pays the doctors and hospitals. And Democrats are right in saying we've got to have guaranteed affordability for seniors. There's got to be coverages that are affordable. We guarantee that. Those words, guaranteed affordability. Traditional Medicare. 4 words. Key to the heart of what Democrats have felt strongly. Republicans have felt strongly about choice and alternatives so that you hold everybody accountable. I think they got a good point. That's right at the heart of, I think, principled bipartisanship. And I use those words, principled bipartisanship, because there's a chance to deal with something that's going to be a big deal for your kid. There are no costs going up in America like Medicare costs and health care costs. I think that's the kind of principled approach that we ought to be looking at. Deficits, mortgages, refinance, and then on the entitlement side, and obviously Social Security is going to be a big challenge too. And personally, I think that, again, looking back at history, what Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, conservative Republican and liberal Democrat, agreed on is going to have to be something, pretty close, to the model. But I want everybody in the audience and at home to know that the reason I'm reaching out across the aisle on this Medicare issue is because the stakes are so high and the costs are going up so rapidly.
581. 563.
Yes, thank you, Ron, for coming to see us. We have some issues that we'd like to discuss. One issue that I had in mind was all too often I'm reading email about illegal immigrants that are being paid Social Security that have not paid into the system. I would like to know what your views are on that. as well as another issue is reducing the military over the next 10 years, the funding for that eventually that we're going to be having more problems with unemployment for our service people, and the funding, of course, for the benefits for the promises that we've received by serving in the military.
Okay. People asking good questions, and I'm doing some serious scribbling here. Immigration, and the second one was about military spending and benefits for
the reduction of the services over the next 10 years that they're talking about.
Yeah, well, how it's going to affect them. Good. Okay. With respect to immigration, and this is a hugely important issue, here in the Valley, the immigration system is broken. And there's no other way to describe it. With respect to what you're talking about, are people who are here undocumented, here illegally, getting Social Security, is probably more likely to be the related program. It's called SSI, Supplemental Security Income, which is really public assistance. And if you know of instances of people unlawfully getting it, I want to know about it to follow it up. But let's talk about what I think is a central kind of question, and that is what are we going to do to fix a broken system? And it's so broken that most people in politics have ducked this, and this has come all the way since the 2008 campaign. Remember the last time the Congress ducked this over my opposition? We had the 2008 presidential campaign. We had 3 debates between Barack Obama and John McCain. 3 debates, 90 minutes each, and nobody once mentioned immigration. 2008, the last presidential campaign. 3 90-minute debates, no mention of immigration because everybody was just ducking. I want to tell you what I think are the elements of immigration reform. The first is you've got to toughen up what you're doing at the borders. In other words, nothing comes together if you're not in a better position to protect your sovereignty. So it starts at the borders. Number 2, you've got to enforce the laws on the books. I mean, if we don't comply with the laws on the books, we undermine everything that makes our country so special. It's kind of like why we obey traffic lights, is that we don't obey traffic lights. We don't get a ticket. Everybody's colliding with each other and people getting hurt. So you've got to comply with the laws on the books. That would mean, for example, employers who knowingly hire people who are here illegally should pay sanctions. That is the way we do it. The consequences for not complying with the laws on the books. The third kind of piece of this puzzle is essentially respecting what is going to be the big challenge for people who are here now illegally, who are undocumented. And some people say, well, let's just round them all up and we're going to export them. If you're for that proposal, tell me how you're going to do it. Are we all going to send government agencies out and knock on everybody's door and say, good morning, I'm here from the government. If you're here illegally, we're going to all leave now and you're going to be exported. That's not going to happen. You're talking over 10 million people. So what I'd like to see us talk about as a country is to say that if you come forward voluntarily during a certain period of time and you pay a fine because you broke the law, that's why we call it illegal immigration, and you've shown that you've mastered English, obviously critical for contributing to our economy, and you've broken no other laws other than the initial one, I personally would say that you ought to be given a chance to go to the end of the citizenship line and apply to be a citizen. Now, some people, and I understand this, they say, Ron, what are you talking about? That's amnesty. Well, to me, it wouldn't be amnesty if you acknowledged that you'd broken the law, you had to pay the fine, showed you mastered English, showed you hadn't broken any other law, and then you were allowed to go to the end of the citizenship line. Somehow we've got to break the spiral. And something close to that, I think, is what we ought to pick up on. And by the way, George W. Bush and Ted Kennedy came pretty close to an agreement that looked like that. They weren't there, but they came pretty darn close. Again, a conservative Republican and a liberal. They were Democrat, both of whom wanted to be bipartisan on this immigration issue. With respect to the military, I think there are two issues. The first is, I'm on the intelligence committee, by the way. My older daughter calls it the so-called intelligence committee. And, it's a dangerous world. As you know, as a military man, and I go into classified sessions every week and walk out, there are plenty of threats. Dangerous world. A lot of people do not wish the United States well. The question is, what are we going to do to get the maximum value for our tax dollars? And what the President outlined yesterday, and I wasn't back, I have not gotten a classified briefing on it yet, so I'm just going to tell you what I saw in the papers. Made it clear that he was serious about Iran, the threat in Iran, the Straits of Hormuz being critical for the world's oil supply and national security. That he was focused on Korea, he understood Pakistan, and he kind of kicking off a number of the threats. But at the same time, we're going to reduce the size of the Army. And we're going to have to reduce some of those aircraft, carriers, billion-dollar, aircraft, operations. And that's because of that, debt, and because not all spending, whether it's on the social side or the military side, is created equal. Some of it just isn't going to bring us the value we need either on the national security side or on the domestic side. So that's what I'm trying to focus on, is trying to show every single dollar that goes out the door is going to give you as a taxpayer the value with respect to both domestic programs and national security programs. Now, because we're going to make those tough choices with respect to weapons and the number of men and women in uniform and the like, in my view, there's no rationale for cutting people's earned benefits. The people who serve this country are part of what is implicitly a social contract. They honor us by wearing the uniform of the United States, and we say to them, we're a grateful nation, and we will be there for you, for your medical care, and for your loved ones if, heaven forbid, you should perish serving the United States. And I'm never going to be part of breaking that kind of special commitment. I serve on the Senate Budget Committee, and a special focus of mine has been to protect those earned benefits. Those are not benefits that just flew out of the sky and somebody said, here, you can have them by osmosis. They're earned benefits because you wore the uniform of the United States and stood for the protection of all of us. And because we're making changes with respect to military priorities and how many will be in the Army and the nature of the threats and the like, that, in my view, is not rationale for cutting earned benefits to men and women who've worn the uniform. They're called earned benefits for a reason. They served, they protected all of us, and now I'm going to do my job as a member of the Senate Budget Committee, which is essentially the first stop in the kind of legislative gauntlet in order to protect what they've done for all of us.
546. 546. Okay, and then 588 would be the next one. 588. Is it on? Oh, okay.
By the way, Fritz, who's here from our office, is a local voice. Is this actually your town, Fritz?
Pretty much, yeah.
Stayton? How about a round of applause for Fritz, the local voice? Fritz is so good that when we go to a lot of towns, people are much more interested in talking to Fritz than they are to me.
You got me confused here on a couple things. I had a thought on Social Security, but I want to put one in the military too.
Good.
Since I was
fair enough.
Because I'm one of those fellas that put in about 21 years playing soldier, and I was always promised this free medical care for the rest of my life that is now costing me $100 a month. That's something to think about for the young people today, because obviously they're hearing about that type of thing. Might be harder to sell them on that program now. The other thing is that Social Security and Medicare, of course, are very important to me. And I think it's a very good thing that you're doing to support that and keep that as a very important goal. And just the general overall thought is we really appreciate the efforts that you're trying to make in the bipartisan area. Because obviously nothing goes anywhere if we can't share. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate your words, and particularly the challenge today. If you look at so many of the forces in our society, the new media, which has clearly made communications more edgy and more, let's put it this way, let me be diplomatic, more provocative. And campaign funds, which tend to, again, go to the more extreme views. A lot of these forces have really empowered both the far right and the far left. And I hope you've seen what I've been trying to do is to say, let's see if we can get beyond some of that, acknowledging valid viewpoints. I mean, I think Occupy Wall Street has a legitimate point on the question of income inequality. The question of the gap between people at the top and the people at the bottom. We can debate how to deal with it, but I think Democrats, Republicans, people of all philosophies can say this is a real issue. I think folks in the Tea Party have had a legitimate point of view with respect to the size of government. And the size of government and the inefficiency of government in a number of instances. We can debate how to do it and what the approaches are. But at some point, after you acknowledge people's valid points, you've got to find a way to get beyond the shouting and the arguing and the constant electioneering and actually solve some problems, which of course is what we as Americans do best. We're pragmatists. We have a great sense of fairness. We have great heart for the underdog. We want to give everybody an opportunity. People ask me about my tax bill. I can give you my philosophy of taxes in one sentence. I want a tax system that gives everybody in America the opportunity to get ahead. Everybody. If you're successful in America, I want to be able to say you're going to be treated fairly, good for you. We're going to have a tax policy that gives you a chance to keep on being successful. If you don't have much in America, you're going to have a tax system that gives you an opportunity to get ahead as well and achieve your hopes and your dreams. So I know that this is much less sensationalistic. It is. It's not going to be the fodder for cable, shows. It's kind of interesting. We often get calls, like in the morning, back in D.C. Senate session, some cable show will call up, and they'll say, "Oh, we'd like Ron to talk about X and Y and blank. What will you be talking about?" And we often, as I've talked about here today, talk about the Democratic and Republican opportunities for coming together and solving something. And somebody goes, oh, we'll get back to you. And then, it doesn't happen all the time, but I watch the show at night. And the show at night, beyond the fact not wanting to be anything I'm part of, the Republican is way to the right, the Democrat is way to the left, and I want to plug my ears because the decibel level is so loud because it was clear what the show was designed to be. Maximum verbal bloodlust. To just have another attack. Anybody can do that. If you want to send somebody to Congress to just attack the other side, we can find a whole pack of people. Yeah, it's like building a house. Tearing it down, easy. Building one up, hard. So I appreciate the kind words about bipartisanship. But if ever there was an argument for bipartisanship on big issues, we sure saw it at the end of the last year, where with 535 members of Congress and one president, and in this country, whether you're Democrat or Republican, we want our president be successful and represent our country, all that huffing and puffing led to a 2-month payroll tax extension. So we can do better. That's what I'm trying to do with the bipartisan tax reform bill with Senator Coates. That's what I'm trying to do on Medicare with the bipartisan proposal with Congressman Ryan. That's what Independence at Home is all about, getting people the chance to get better care at a less affordable price. That's what our forestry policy is all about. And we do a lot of things well in our state, but what we do best is grow things. We ought to grow them and add value to them and then export them somewhere. In each of those areas, and I could list a variety of others, what I'm trying to do, and isn't always successful, is to get between all that bickering and polarization so that people at home can say, at least they're trying to get beyond just the arguing and force of bipartisanship.
588.
Good afternoon, Senator. I have a very short question. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Glennis Holcomb. I'm a National Guard soldier out of Bend, Oregon. I have two questions. One is a very short question, and two I might have to a little bit elaborate on. The first question would be Working Families has been working on some legislation for the past couple of years on working on the state bank. I was wondering where would the Senate be on that piece of legislation, or if there's anything that's going to be evolved out of that legislation that was brought forward. And the second one is kind of a little bit elaborate, but when it boils down, I think it says what would be the responsibility of corporations to the state?
The first question, with respect to a state bank, I'm going to kind of take a pass on because I'm not up on all of the the details. Suffice it to say, one of the things our state legislators, and they're going into their special session here coming up very shortly, one of the things they particularly dislike is members of the United States Congress coming in and telling them what to do. And they're making the argument now, hey, you guys in Congress aren't doing that great with all the federal stuff you got on your hands. You got a lot of chutzpah coming in here and telling us what we ought to do about a state bank and all that kind of thing. I always thought it was kind of an interesting idea. I don't know about the details and the like, so I'm going to, I guess, formally take a pass. With respect to corporations, this is most directly an issue right now with respect to campaign finances and what are the obligations under the law and the campaign rules. And what the Supreme Court said in the campaign finance area is something I disagree with very strongly. And that is, they basically said that a rich person's checkbook equals a poor person's soapbox, and that everybody can spend whatever they want, and that's why you're seeing all these soft money donations and donations from corporations and all kinds of other groups, labor and the like. And I think that's got to be curtailed, and I've been the sponsor of legislation to deal with it. So I think there does need to be accountability with corporations and all interest groups in the campaign finance area. Because if we don't, it basically puts democracy up for sale. That's what it means. And this Supreme Court decision, it's called the Citizens United case, really blows the hinges off the doors of democracy. I mean, it really literally says that under their interpretation of the First Amendment, the rich person's checkbook, or the corporate checkbook, is pretty much the same thing as the poor person's soapbox. And I don't share that view at all. I don't think that's the correct interpretation of the law, and I'm part of the effort in the Congress to overturn it. And I guess the other thing I want to say, are you in school?
Not currently, Senator. I am in school for horticulture, but
but I will be starting up as soon as I get back.
Good. Thank you for your service to our country and the Guard. And where are you going on a tour?
I'm going to be going on the tour here in probably like next 40 miles.
Afghanistan?
No, somewhere in Israel.
Be safe. Thank you for your service. And good question. Oh.
549 and 577. 549 be first.
Senator, I wanted to address my concerns about the judicial, or not the judicial, the legislative branch is letting the judicial, or not judicial, the executive branch too much power. And it's gone on longer than the current Congress and the current presidency. But now with our president being able to, while Congress is in session, appoint people to the Consumer Board, and then also with the NDAA Act, being able to detain an American citizen without due process, concerns me that we're now heading towards a police state in this country where TSA and airports are screening little old ladies needlessly, and Homeland Security has checkpoints on freeways back east doing exercises. This isn't the liberty or the America that I grew up in, sir.
I don't know if you're aware, I voted against the NDAA legislation that you were concerned about because I thought in a number of areas there were really very, at best, ambiguous protections for the rights of our people. That's how I put it, charitably. So I was one of a small number of people who, in the United States Senate, voted against that bill. With respect to the other topic, I think you're talking about the recess, appointments. This is an area where the Constitution, by the way, explicitly gives the President the authority to make recess appointments. But the system, and this is apropos of the gentleman's question in the second row who asked about bipartisanship, the system really only works if Democrats and Republicans and the Congress and the President come together on these key appointments. The system won't work, otherwise. I mean, it just completely breaks down. So it seems to me when we get back, we've got to have an agreement with the bipartisan leadership in the Congress that we're going to have votes. We're going to have votes, specific up or down votes on appointments, and they're going to be done during the regularly held session of the Congress. And I'm going to do everything I can to be part of an effort to work that out between Democrats and Republicans in the Senate and the White House, because you can argue till cows come home about constitutional authority. The President does have specific authority under the Constitution to make recess appointments, but I think that begs the question. We've got to do what the gentleman in the second row was talking about, is to find some way to come together, and that means Democrats and Republicans in the Senate in particular, working with the White House, so appointments get votes in the Senate, floor votes in the Senate, and people vote up or down.
But they weren't recessed when you did this, correct?
Well, there's also that question with respect to what a pro forma session, means. And again, these are great lawyers' full employment programs. And my wife Nancy agreed to marry me because she said, "I know you're not a good lawyer, so let's leave it at that." The point is, we can have big constitutional bicker fests if we want. We can do that. Or we can do as the gentleman is talking about. Get serious about solving some problems. And very often I go to the meetings and I listen to what the far left has to say and I listen to what the far right has to say, and I kind of wait until the turn comes around. I say, well, could maybe we all sort of agree on the following approach and try to come together on it. So your points are good. You asked about NDAA. We had a recorded vote in the Senate. I voted against it for reasons that really are quite similar to what you talked about. I think the protections in a variety of areas for the constitutional rights of our people were pretty ambiguous and unacceptable in the bill, so I voted against it. And on the recess appointments, we can have lawyers entertain us until the cows come home with good arguments on both sides. They can cite constitutional authority, particularly on recess appointments, and then we can debate Senate pro forma rules and pro forma sessions and the like. I think it would be much more advisable for all of us, particularly during this recess, to say, this is not what we want. What we want is what the gentleman here is talking about, is for people to try to come together. There should be votes on appointments after their floor debates, so that you can turn on your C-SPAN and, heaven forbid, see people actually having a discussion about a real issue and a real debate. Quaint idea, huh? Quaint idea.
577.
Well, 577 is getting ready on my cheat sheet supplied by Fritz. We got a whole bunch of our elected officials and officials here. I just want to give them some good chance for some community kudos. Where is Andy Gardner, North St. Anne School Superintendent? Hey, thank you, Andy. Good work you're doing. Brunk Conway is here. North St. Anne School Board. There you are. Great. He's also a Commander Sergeant Major in the Oregon National Guard. See you tomorrow. Demobilization. Glad to have our people home tomorrow. That brings a smile, a lot of smiles for the demobilization. Always we go to demobilization, everybody's sitting there and say, folks, the speech is going to be really short. I mean, like really, really short. The families couldn't care less. So you can see the loved ones. Gene Ditter is here from Arcelluti. Great, thank you. Good to see you. Walt Bergelau is here. Bergelau, thank you. Well, let's give all four of them a big round of applause. You know, you're the mayor of a small town like Gene. I bet you got a big mansion up there and Sublimity and a lot of limos and stuff like that. It's one of those jobs called status in lieu of salary. Okay, thank you all. Appreciate your service. Go ahead, Mark.
577, does anybody have that number? That's not 552 and 570. 552. Nobody has 552 or 570?
When we get into the late afternoon, I know that there are folks who are like thinking there's a really important ball game on, like at 6 or 7, like particularly Becky.
I don't need a mic.
There's my friend. There's my senior citizen here. Yes, sir.
This gentleman asked a question earlier about long-term care and so forth.
Yeah.
And you glossed over something that you should be proud of. Back in 1975, as a very young person, you were responsible for starting what I call long-term care in Oregon. I think everybody ought to give him a hand for that, because and part of that program is something I volunteered for almost 30 years, Oregon Project Independence. I begged at the Capitol for, and that program, and the one that you helped start, has saved Oregon millions of dollars since 1975. But I guess the question I would want to ask you is, Alaska has oil, Wyoming has coal, Nevada has gaming, Oregon has timber. And I'm not talking about decimating forests, selectively cutting, reseeding, and every one of those things create jobs. And we need jobs in Oregon. Thank you.
Well, great point. And we talk about timber, but without making this a bouquet tossing contest, just tell you how important those memories are, to me. And you think Oregon literally was the first to get serious about saying that government dollars that had been earmarked for nursing home care ought to be used for home care. And it became known as Oregon Project Independence. And we all went out, because I remember it, and I saw Reese Shepard actually here recently, who was an incredibly inspiring figure from Eugene for a lot of the seniors. And we all went out and said, folks, talk about bipartisan and common sense. Said, here's a chance for seniors to have more of what they want, which is to be in their homes at less cost to taxpayers, to institutional care. And we look up at legislators, and you all remember this, and we kind of like say, is that logical enough? More of what you want at less price to the taxpayers? And here we are, as we talked about at the beginning of the meeting, still fighting this battle where we haven't gotten close to covering what are really the dual eligibles, Medicare and Medicaid. So just know how appreciative I am, and that work is continuing on. And I've continued to be on the Senate Select Committee on Aging. I was on the Aging Committee in the House, and you and Ruth and Ralph Groner and a whole group, big group of people really helped to build something special, and the fight's going to go on. Let's talk timber a little bit. We have to recognize that the current forestry policy isn't good for anybody. We've got this huge backlog, that is just a magnet for fires out there because it hadn't been thinned out. People see what happens when it gets hot and dry. You have these infernos, and I use that word for a reason. They're infernos because they come about as a result of years of neglect. We haven't gone in there and thinned them out, and it gets dry and hot, or somebody drops a match or something, and then you've got this raging fire on your hands. So that can't continue. I've been able for the first time to get an agreement on the east side with our major national forests and timber companies, a big group of responsible environmental folks, and we've been able to get an agreement, for example, so there won't be so many appeals on timber. There's a delay. There's something kind of in between where you get a chance to raise your concern, but it gets resolved, and we get on with the business of what you're talking about. And in this particular case with thinning, we've got a chance for a lot of jobs in the biomass area where we can put people to work in terms of clean energy. And we had a good success in 2011. You may recall that the Obama administration was talking about regulating biomass like it was some kind of carbon spewing chemical thousands of miles away. And I'm chairman of the forestry subcommittee, and I said, this is anti-science, it's anti-jobs, and it's anti-environment, and I'm going to do everything I can to derail it, and we're able to. So we're starting to make a little bit of headway back there, but we've got to get back into active management. And this is going to be a big issue in 2012 because the timber payments law, which I wrote, and it's brought Oregon about $2.5 billion over the last decade, is up for extension. We're going to get it extended, but a lot of members of the delegation would like to add an active management component to this whole discussion, and I support that. We've got to see what the House wants to do because they've sort of taken the lead on that. Because I authored the timber payments law, that's something that I've kind of taken the lead on because I chair the forestry committee and wrote it twice and the like. But together, those two get us back into a sensible, balanced approach with respect to forestry that is going to allow us to create jobs in hard-hit, resource-dependent communities like we have in the valley, and is also going to be good for the environment. How's it good for the environment if we continue to see big chunks of our wonderful treasures go up in smoke because there's so much fuel overload in the forest? And it really does become a magnet for forests. And one other little bit of news, Jeff Bingaman, the senator from New Mexico who chairs the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, announced his retirement a bit ago, and I will be the senior Democrat on the Energy Committee in 2013, so I'll have a chance to go to bat for Oregon on these kinds of issues as well. All right.
Can I make one more little comment?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
If you were able to
some way or other get every state in the union to have the same system that Oregon has, we would save billions of dollars.
Talking about on health care?
On health care.
Well, you know, what's interesting about that, the independence at home law that I wrote, which we finally got the administration started to implement, is essentially a national version of independence, Project Independence. The national law is called Independence at Home, but it's sort of a national version of Oregon's Project Independence. And if you ask me what it was based on, essentially what Oregon and the VA have done together, and I mentioned those new numbers on the VA, and let me tell you, that's really shocked some people back in DC. We presented them that VA study. It's brand new, 24% savings. And the people are actually sicker than the ones that we were looking at in OPI and Independence at Home. They have more of the comorbidities, more heart, stroke, diabetes, as you know, that are called comorbidities. Great to see you. You're looking good health.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. I'm Bob Patterson. I'm from Salem. I'd like to address an issue that seldom was discussed at these town halls, but it affects everybody in this room. Since I got out of the service in the early 70s, I've spent the better part of the last 4 decades, if you will, subordinate to one postmaster general after another. And they've espoused the philosophy uniformly that the Postal Service management has the absolute right to mismanage the Postal Service. And I know very well that you and Senator Merkley and Congressman Schrader, Congressman DeFazio are working diligently to try to stop some of the things that are going on with the Postal Service right now, and a lot of the folks in this room don't understand exactly what's taking place. That being said, and I know you don't subscribe to this philosophy that the Postal Service management has the right to mismanage the Postal Service, but insomuch that Postmaster General Donahoe believes he has the right to mismanage the Postal Service, I'm kind of wondering if there's a nexus between the Postal Service and some of these other agency heads, whether it's the Social Security Administration, or OPM, or OMB, or Medicare, or the IRS, or whatever the case, that these agency heads don't feel that they have the same absolute right to do the same thing, to mismanage these various agencies of government, and in doing so, this is affecting the taxpayers in that respect. And if you could maybe address your feelings on that. Thank you, sir.
First of all, with respect to the Postal Service, now is the perfect time for you to weigh in with suggestions, because what the Oregon delegation has done, we've been very active, significant number of us, in this effort, particularly protect Postal Service offices in rural areas from just arbitrary cuts. There's now a freeze